The morning sun rose over New Haven Colony like it had for the past 12 years. Farmers walked through golden wheat fields that stretched toward the purple mountains. Children ran between the simple metal buildings, laughing and chasing each other. It was a peaceful place, far from Earth, where 3,000 people had built a new home among the stars. Grace Morrison stood on the porch of the administration building, drinking her coffee and watching the colony wake up. She was a tall woman with gray streaks in her brown hair and tired eyes that had seen too many problems solved and too many arguments settled. As colony administrator, every problem eventually landed on her desk. Her husband Daniel walked up behind her and put his arm around her shoulders. He was a big man with rough hands from years of farming. Before that, he had been a Marine, but those days felt like another lifetime now. "Beautiful morning," he said. Grace nodded and leaned into him. "Too beautiful. Makes me nervous." Daniel laughed. "You worry too much." The first explosion proved her right. A ball of fire erupted near the landing pads, sending chunks of metal spinning through the air. People screamed and ran in every direction. Grace dropped her coffee cup and stared at the sky, where dark shapes were descending through the clouds. "Get everyone to the bunkers," Daniel said. His voice had changed. It was hard now, like steel. The farmer was gone, and the Marine had returned. More explosions rocked the colony as alien ships opened fire from above. Grace ran toward the communications center, while Daniel sprinted toward the armory. She could hear him shouting orders to the security team, organizing them into defensive positions. Inside the communications center, a young woman with short red hair was frantically working at a console. Lucy Vance was only 23, but she was the best communications technician the colony had. Her fingers flew across the controls as she tried to send a distress signal. "I can't get through," Lucy said, her voice shaking. "Something is blocking our transmissions. Some kind of jamming field." Grace grabbed her shoulder. "Keep trying. Earth needs to know what's happening." Outside, the battle was already lost. The colony had a small security force with light weapons meant to handle wildlife and the occasional dispute. They were not soldiers. They were not prepared for war. The alien ships landed beyond the wheat fields, and troops poured out. The Vectari were tall and thin, with gray skin and 4 arms. They moved quickly, their weapons cutting down anyone who resisted. Grace watched through the window as good people, her friends and neighbors, fell to the ground and did not get up. Daniel burst through the door, blood running down his face from a cut on his forehead. "We can't hold them. We need to evacuate to the underground bunkers. Now." The bunkers had been built for storms, not war. They were a network of tunnels and chambers carved into the rock beneath the colony, designed to shelter people from the violent weather that sometimes swept across the planet. They had food, water, and medical supplies stored there. It was their only hope. Grace activated the colony-wide alarm, and her voice echoed from every speaker. "All civilians evacuate to the underground bunkers immediately. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill." People ran through the streets, carrying children and helping the elderly. Daniel and his security team formed a line at the bunker entrance, firing at the advancing Vectari to buy time. Lucy grabbed her equipment and followed Grace underground. The next hours were chaos. People crowded into the tunnels, crying and asking questions that no one could answer. Grace moved among them, trying to keep order, trying to keep hope alive. Daniel came down last, sealing the heavy doors behind him. "They've taken the surface," he reported. "We lost 42 people. Maybe more." Grace closed her eyes and took a deep breath. 42 people. 42 friends. 42 names she would have to remember. Over the next 2 days, they learned more about their enemy. The Vectari were conquerors. They traveled from world to world, taking what they wanted and destroying anything that stood in their way. Humanity was new to the galaxy, and the Victari saw them as a threat that needed to be eliminated. Lucy worked day and night, trying to break through the jamming field. She took apart radios, computers, and anything else she could find, building something new from the pieces. Grace brought her food that she forgot to eat and water that she forgot to drink. "It's not working," Lucy said on the second night, tears running down her face. "I can't break through. No one knows we're alive down here." Grace knelt beside her and took her hands. "Then keep trying. Keep working. Somewhere up there, Earth is waiting to hear from us. We just have to find a way to reach them." Daniel organized the able-bodied colonists into teams. Some guarded the tunnel entrances. Others managed food and water distribution. A few brave volunteers made quick trips to the surface at night, gathering supplies and information. They brought back news that made everyone's heart sink. The Victari commander had set up headquarters in the administration building. More ships had arrived, bringing more soldiers. They were searching for the bunkers, and it was only a matter of time before they found them. Dr. Henry Shaw, the colony's only doctor, set up a medical station in one of the larger chambers. He treated wounds, calmed fears, and did his best to keep everyone healthy in the cramped, dark tunnels. He was an older man with gentle hands and a kind voice that made people feel safe even when nothing was safe anymore. On the third night, Grace called a meeting of the colony leadership. They sat in a circle, their faces lit by emergency lights, and tried to make a plan. "We can survive down here for about 2 months," Grace said. "After that, our food runs out. The Victari will find us before then," Daniel added. "They're using scanners, searching the ground. Maybe a week. Maybe 2. Lucy looked up from her work. "I have an idea. I can build a narrow-band transmitter. It might be able to punch through the jamming field. But it will take time, and I'll need to get close to the surface to use it." "How much time?" Grace asked. 3 weeks. Maybe more." Daniel shook his head. "We might not have 3 weeks." Grace looked around at the tired, scared faces of her friends. They had built this colony together. They had turned empty land into a home. She was not ready to give up. "Then we make sure we have 3 weeks," she said. "We fight. We hide. We do whatever it takes to survive. Earth will not forget us. We just have to hold on long enough for them to find us." No one argued. No one suggested surrender. These were people who had left everything behind to build a new world. They knew how to work. They knew how to struggle. And now they would learn how to survive in the darkness of the tunnels. Hope was small. But it was not dead. Not yet. 3 weeks had passed since the Victari came. The tunnels that had once felt like shelter now felt like a prison. The air was thick and stale, and the emergency lights cast shadows that made everything look wrong. Children had stopped playing. Adults had stopped smiling. Fear lived in every corner. Grace walked through the tunnels every morning, checking on her people. She knew every face, every name, every story. She stopped to hold the hands of the elderly and to comfort the young. She listened to complaints and worries, even when she had no answers to give. The food situation was worse than expected. Some supplies had been damaged during the evacuation, and 3,000 mouths needed feeding every day. Grace cut rations twice already, and still the stores shrank faster than she hoped. Daniel led his guerrilla teams on dangerous raids almost every night. They slipped out through hidden exits and struck at Victari supply lines, stealing food and medicine. Each raid was a gamble. Each night could be the last. Katie Dunn was one of his best people. She was a geologist who had come to New Haven to study the planet's strange rock formations. Now she used her knowledge of the tunnel systems to find safe paths and hidden routes. She was quiet and serious, with dark eyes that noticed everything. Marcus Bell was the youngest member of the team. He was barely 20, with a skinny frame and nervous hands. But those hands were good at building things that exploded. He made bombs from chemicals stolen from the colony's farming supplies, and his traps had killed more Vectari than anyone else's weapons. One night, Daniel's team returned with a full supply crate. The colonists gathered around as they opened it, and for the first time in weeks, there was real food. Fresh ration packs, medical supplies, and clean water. People cried with relief, but the celebration was short. One of Daniel's men, a farmer named Pete, had been shot during the raid. Dr. Shaw worked through the night trying to save him, but by morning, Pete was gone. Another name for the list of the dead. In her small corner of the tunnels, Lucy Vance worked without rest. Her hands were cut and burned from handling electronics, and her eyes were red from staring at circuits in dim light. The narrowband transmitter was almost finished, but almost was not good enough. "I need one more power cell," she told Grace. "Without it, the signal won't be strong enough." Grace found her one. It meant taking power from the medical bay, dimming Dr. Shaw's lights, but he understood. Everything depended on that signal. On the 21st day, Lucy was ready. The transmitter was an ugly thing, built from pieces of a dozen different machines, held together with wire and hope. But Lucy believed it would work. The problem was getting close enough to the surface. The Vectari patrols were everywhere, and the jamming field was strongest near the ground. Lucy needed to reach a collapsed section of tunnel that opened near the surface, close enough to push her signal through. Daniel insisted on going with her. Grace wanted to argue, but she knew better. Lucy was not a fighter, and the tunnels near the surface were dangerous. They left at midnight, moving through passages that grew narrower and darker as they climbed. Kitty guided them by memory, counting steps and turns in her head. Marcus stayed behind to guard their escape route. The collapsed section was exactly where Katie remembered it. A rock slide had opened a crack in the ceiling, letting in cold night air and pale starlight. Lucy could see the sky for the first time in 3 weeks, and she had to stop herself from crying. She set up the transmitter with shaking hands. The equipment hummed and clicked as it powered on. Lucy checked the frequency, adjusted the antenna, and began recording her message. "This is New Haven Colony calling Earth. We are under attack by alien forces. We have survivors in the underground bunkers. Please send help. I repeat, please send help." She broadcast the message on a tight beam, aimed at the nearest deep space relay station. 30 seconds. That was all she had before the Vectari would detect the signal. At 25 seconds, Daniel grabbed her arm. "We need to go, now." Lucy heard them coming. Heavy footsteps and strange voices in a language she did not understand. She grabbed her equipment and ran. They made it back to the main bunkers, just ahead of the patrol. Daniel sealed the passage behind them, collapsing it with a small explosive charge. If the Vectari wanted to follow, they would have to dig. "Did it work?" Grace asked, her face pale with worry. Lucy could only shake her head. "I don't know. The signal went out, but I don't know if it made it through the jamming field. I don't know if anyone heard." 11 days later and light years away, a deep space relay station received a fragment of a transmission. The signal was weak and broken, but the words were clear enough. "New Haven. Attack. Survivors. Help." The message was forwarded to Earth Defense Command, where it landed on the desk of Admiral Patricia Cole. She was a small woman with silver, hair cut short and eyes that had seen 3 wars. She read the message twice, then called her staff together. "New Haven was presumed destroyed," said one of her officers. "We sent a scout ship 2 weeks after the attack. They found debris in orbit and no life signs on the surface." "The scout ship was wrong," Patricia said. "People are alive down there. Our people. And they're asking for help." She stood up and walked to the map display, showing the stars between Earth and Kepler 442b. 4 weeks of travel, minimum. Every day she waited was another day those colonists might not survive. "I want Task Force Talon assembled within 48 hours, she ordered. The carrier Relentless, 3 destroyers, 2 marine assault ships, and the Night Hammer. Full combat readiness. Her officers exchanged worried looks. Task Force Talon was Earth's rapid response force, meant for emergencies. Deploying it meant stripping defenses from other sectors. "Admiral," one officer said carefully, "the Victari have a significant presence in that system. We could be walking into a trap." Patricia turned to face him, and her eyes were cold. "Then we spring the trap and kill everyone inside it. Those are our people, Commander. We don't leave our people behind." Within 48 hours, the fleet was assembled. Patricia stood on the bridge of the Relentless and watched her ships form up for the hyperspace jump. Marines checked their weapons. Pilots ran final tests on their fighters. Everyone knew what was at stake. "Set course for Kepler 442b, Patricia ordered. "Maximum speed." The stars stretched and blurred as the fleet entered hyperspace. Behind them, Earth grew small and disappeared. Ahead, 3,000 people waited in the dark. Not knowing if help would ever come, Patricia allowed herself one small moment of doubt, then pushed it aside. She had a job to do, and she would do it. That was what the uniform meant. That was what being human meant. You don't leave your people behind. Ever. 6 weeks underground, and the colony was breaking. Not all at once, but slowly in small ways that added up to something terrible. People argued over nothing. Children cried for sunlight they could not have. The walls seemed to press closer every day. Grace felt it too. The weight of 3,000 lives sat on her shoulders, and some days it was hard to stand. She walked the tunnels until her feet hurt, solving problems, calming fears, holding together a community that wanted to fall apart. The Victari had found them. Not the main bunker, not yet, but they knew the colonists were somewhere below the ground. They sent probes into tunnel entrances and flooded lower passages with toxic gas. Every day, the safe space grew smaller. Daniel's leg was healing badly. A Victari blade had cut deep during a raid 2 weeks ago, and Dr. Shaw did not have the right medicine to fight the infection. Daniel tried to hide the pain, but Grace saw it in his eyes. He walked with a limp now, leaning on a metal pipe he used as a cane. "You need to rest," she told him one night, finding him awake and staring at a map of the tunnels. "I'll rest when our people are safe," he said. She sat down beside him and took his hand. It was rough and warm. The hand that had built their farm, that had held their daughter before the sickness took her years ago. So much pain in those hands. So much love. "If you die," Grace said quietly, "who leads the fighters?" Daniel had no answer. He squeezed her hand and said nothing. The sickness came a week later. It started with coughs and fevers, spreading quickly through the cramped tunnels. Dr. Shaw called it respiratory infection, made worse by the bad air and close quarters. He had enough medicine for 20 people. He had 200 patients. Grace helped in the medical bay, holding hands and wiping foreheads. She watched good people struggle to breathe and made promises she was not sure she could keep. The death count rose by 1, then 2, then 5. The burial team worked every day. On the 43rd day, the Victari sent a message. They found one of the hidden exits and dropped a projector inside. The image of Commander Zethkal appeared in the tunnel, 10 feet tall and glowing blue. The Victari commander was taller than the others, with silver markings on his gray skin that showed his rank. His forearms were clasped behind his back, and his voice was cold and empty. "Humans of New Haven," Zethkal said, "your resistance is meaningless. We have found your hiding place. Surrender now and submit to processing, and some of you may live." Refuse, and you will all die in the darkness, forgotten and alone. No one spoke. The colonists just stared at the image with fear and anger in their eyes. They knew what processing meant. Slaves, test subjects, death with extra steps. Grace stepped forward. She was tired and dirty and scared, but she stood straight and looked at the image without flinching. "Go to hell," she said. Someone turned off the projector, and the tunnel erupted in cheers. It felt good, that moment of defiance. But Grace knew it changed nothing. The Vectari would not stop. They came in force 2 days later. Vectari soldiers pushed into the outer tunnels, fighting through traps and ambush. Daniel's fighters fell back, trading ground for time. The air filled with smoke and screaming. Marcus was on the front line, setting charges and falling back, setting charges and falling back. He was good at it, better than anyone expected. But the Vectari were learning. They found his patterns. They predicted his moves. They caught him at a junction point, 3 soldiers surrounding him before he could trigger his last bomb. He fought with his hands and a knife, but it was not enough. They dragged him away into the darkness. When Daniel heard the news, he wanted to go after Marcus immediately. Katie stopped him. "It's a trap," she said. "They want you to come. They'll be waiting." "I don't care," Daniel growled. "He's one of ours." Grace found them arguing and made the decision herself. "We wait. We plan. We bring him back alive." They expected Marcus to be executed. Instead, the Vectari sent him back. He walked into the bunker 3 days later, thin and shaking, with a message carved into his arm in the Vectari language. Dr. Shaw translated it. 48 hours. Marcus collapsed in the medical bay, barely able to speak. Grace sat with him while Dr. Shaw treated his wounds. The young man's eyes were empty, seeing things that would haunt him forever. "They wanted information," Marcus whispered. "The location of the main bunker. How many fighters we have." "I didn't tell them anything." "I didn't tell them." Grace believed him. Whatever they had done to him, he had not broken. That was strength she had not known he had. Lucy came to her that night with news. She had been monitoring Vectari communications with her equipment, listening to their signals, even though she could not break through to send her own. "I found a pattern," Lucy said. "A gap in their patrol schedule. 12 minutes every 6 hours, when the northern tunnels are unguarded. If we move during that window, we can avoid their sensors." Daniel studied the patrol data and made a plan. A small team would go through the northern tunnels during the gap, circle around behind the Vectari position, and attack from an unexpected direction. It was risky. It might not work, but it was their only chance. The 48-hour deadline approached. The colonists gathered in the main chamber, holding hands and praying to whatever gods they believed in. Some wrote letters to family on Earth, knowing the letters might never be sent. Others simply sat in silence, too tired for words. Daniel assembled his team. Katie would guide them through the tunnels. 3 of his best fighters would come along. Grace wanted to go too, but someone had to stay with the colony. Someone had to keep hope alive. "Come back to me," she whispered as Daniel prepared to leave. He kissed her forehead and smiled, though the smile did not reach his eyes. "I always do." The team slipped into the darkness, and the waiting began. Hours passed like years. Grace paced the main chamber, watching the tunnel entrance, jumping at every sound. When they returned, Daniel was bleeding from a wound in his side. 2 of his fighters were carrying a third, who was not moving. But Marcus was with them, holding a captured Vectari weapon, his eyes no longer empty. "The Vectari know we can hurt them now," Daniel said as Dr. Shaw worked on his wounds. "They won't underestimate us again." Grace looked at her husband, at the blood and the pain and the determination on his face, and felt something she had almost forgotten. Pride. Somewhere out there. Beyond the sky they could not see, help was coming. They just had to survive long enough to meet it. And they would survive. They were human. They did not know how to give up. The 48-hour deadline passed. The Victari did not attack. They were planning something bigger, something worse. But for now, for this moment, the colonists of New Haven were still alive. And that was victory enough. Task Force Talon emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system like ghosts from the void. The stars returned to their proper shapes, and Admiral Patricia Cole stood on the bridge of the Relentless, studying the tactical display with cold eyes. "Report," she ordered. 6 Vectari warships in orbit around Kepler 442b. Her tactical officer responded. 1 heavy cruiser, 2 destroyers, 3 support vessels. They haven't detected us yet. Patricia nodded slowly. The enemy outnumbered them in raw firepower, but they had something the Victari did not have: surprise, and the unshakable determination to bring their people home. "Signal the fleet. Communication silence until we engage. We're going to use the planet's moon for cover and hit them before they know we're here." The fleet moved in perfect formation, sliding through the darkness of space like predators stalking prey. The Relentless led the way, followed by the destroyers Swift, Defiant, and Courage. The Marine assault ships Fury and Thunder hung back, carrying the soldiers who would descend to the surface once orbital control was secured. And hidden in the shadow of the formation, the Special Operations vessel Nighthammer waited for its own moment. Commander Jake Ortiz stood in the ready room of the Fury, looking at the faces of his Marines. They were young and old, men and women, all wearing the same hard expression. They had trained for years for missions like this. Rapid insertion into hostile territory. Civilian extraction under fire. Fighting against odds that would make lesser people run. "Listen up," Jake said. "Down there are 3,000 of our people. Farmers, teachers, kids. They've been holding out for nearly 2 months against an enemy that wants them dead. Our job is simple. We go down, we kill every hostile between us and those civilians, and we bring everyone home." Questions? No one spoke. They did not need to. Lieutenant Samantha Price checked her combat engineering gear one more time. Breaching charges, cutting tools, portable shields. Her job was to get doors open and keep her Marines alive. She was good at it. The best in the fleet, some said. 30 minutes to engagement, came the announcement over the ship's speakers. All hands to battle stations. The Victari heavy cruiser hung in orbit like a dark cloud, surrounded by its escort ships. Commander Zethkal stood on its bridge, watching his soldiers on the planet below prepare for their final assault on the human bunkers. He had grown tired of this hunt. It was time to end it. "Order all ground forces to begin the final attack," he commanded. "I want every human dead by sunset." His communication officer moved to obey, but then stopped. "Commander, we're detecting anomalies near the moon. Possible sensor echoes." Zethkal turned sharply. "What kind of echoes?" Before anyone could answer, the Relentless and its fleet emerged from behind the moon at full combat speed. They came like thunder, weapons already firing, and the first 2 Victari destroyers exploded before their shields could rise. Patricia watched the explosions with grim satisfaction. "All ships, maintain attack pattern. Focus fire on that cruiser." The battle turned the black space around Kepler 442b into a hellscape of light and fire. Energy beams crossed in every direction. Missiles streaked between ships, trailing exhaust like angry stars. The Victari recovered from their surprise and fought back with desperate fury. The destroyer, Courage, took a direct hit to its engine section and began to drift, flames pouring from the wound in its side. Patricia watched it die and felt the loss like a knife in her heart, but she could not stop. She could not mourn. "Not yet. Bring us around the planet's gravity well," she ordered. Use the curve to slingshot into a new attack vector. They won't expect us to come from below. The Relentless dove toward the planet, using its gravity to whip around at incredible speed. The Vectari cruiser tried to track them, but it was too slow. The human ship emerged on its flank and fired a full broadside at point-blank range. The cruiser's shields flickered and failed. Explosions ripped along its hull as human weapons found critical systems. In orbit, the Vectari support ships tried to flee. The Swift and Defiant hunted them down, crippling their engines and leaving them dead in space. The Nighthammer slipped through the chaos unseen, deploying boarding pods toward the damaged cruiser. On the planet's surface, Commander Zethkal received the news of the space battle with cold fury. His fleet was dying. There would be no evacuation, no escape. But he could still complete his mission. All units, he ordered. Execute all prisoners immediately. Leave nothing for the humans to save. The Vectari ground forces launched their final assault on the bunkers. They came with overwhelming force, pouring through every tunnel entrance they had found. Daniel's fighters fell back, fighting for every step, dying to buy seconds. Daniel stood at the main entrance with a rifle in his hands and fire in his eyes. His leg screamed with pain, but he ignored it. Grace was somewhere behind him, leading civilians deeper into the tunnels. He would not let the enemy reach her. Hold the line, he shouted to his fighters. Hold them here. The Vectari came in waves, and each wave left more bodies on the ground. But the humans were running out of ammunition, running out of people, running out of time. Marcus fought beside Daniel, the captured Vectari weapon in his hands. Katie was there too, throwing improvised explosives into the enemy ranks. They were farmers and scientists and ordinary people, and they fought like lions. Then the sky burned. The first drop pod hit the ground like a meteor, throwing up a fountain of dirt and fire. Then another and another, streaking through the atmosphere like falling stars. They came by the dozens, punching through the Vectari anti-aircraft fire, slamming into the ground around the bunker entrances. The pods opened, and Earth's Marines poured out. Commander Jake Ortiz was first on the ground, his rifle already firing. His Marines spread out around him, forming defensive lines and pushing the stunned Vectari back. Behind them, the assault ship Fury descended through a storm of enemy fire, its guns blazing. This is Commander Ortiz to any colonial survivors. Jake broadcast on all frequencies. Earth forces are on the ground. We're here to bring you home. In the bunker, Grace heard the message and fell to her knees. Around her, people cried and cheered and held each other. Lucy was laughing and sobbing at the same time, unable to believe that her signal had worked, that help had actually come. Daniel heard it too. He saw the Marines fighting alongside his people, saw the Vectari falling back in confusion. He lowered his rifle and leaned against the tunnel wall, his wounded leg finally giving out. It's about damn time, he whispered. Lieutenant Price led her engineering team to the bunker entrances, blowing through Vectari barricades and clearing paths for the civilians. She found the main entrance guarded by a ragged group of colonists, all of them wounded, all of them still fighting. United Earth Marines, she announced. We're securing this position. Any civilians move to the extraction zone. A big man with a bloody bandage on his leg limped toward her. He looked like he had not slept in weeks, but he was smiling. Daniel Morrison, he said. Colony Security. What took you so long? Price smiled back. Traffic was bad. Above them, the space battle reached its end. The Vectari cruiser exploded in a ball of fire as the Relentless delivered the killing blow. Commander Zethkal was captured by the Nighthammer boarding team. Dragged from his command chair in restraints, Admiral Patricia Cole watched the debris scatter against the stars and allowed herself one moment of satisfaction. Then she turned back to the tactical display. "Get our people off that planet," she ordered. Every last one. The sun was setting on New Haven as the evacuation began. Marines carried wounded civilians to waiting shuttles. Children clung to their parents, staring wide-eyed at the armored soldiers who had fallen from the sky to save them. And on the ridge above the ruined colony, Grace Morrison stood and watched the last light fade from the sky. Her home was gone. Her fields were burned. But her people were alive. Earth had come for them. They were going home. The morning after liberation came soft and golden, as if the planet itself did not know that everything had changed. Smoke still rose from the ruins of New Haven, and the fields that had once fed 3,000 people were black with fire. But the Vectari were gone, and the sky belonged to humanity again. Commander Jake Ortiz walked through the bunker tunnels, stepping over debris and empty weapon cases. His Marines had secured every entrance and cleared every passage. The fighting was over. Now came the harder work of picking up the pieces. He found the colonists gathered in the main chamber, sitting in clusters on the cold stone floor. They were thin and dirty and exhausted, but they were alive. Children slept in their parents' arms. Old friends held hands and wept quietly. The relief in the air was so thick he could almost touch it. A woman approached him, tall and straight despite the shadows under her eyes. She extended her hand, and Jake shook it. "Grace Morrison," she said. "Colony Administrator." "Thank you for coming, Commander." "We should have come sooner," Jake replied. "I'm sorry it took so long." Grace shook her head. "You came. That's what matters." Lieutenant Samantha Price led her engineering team deeper into the tunnels, searching for survivors who might have been separated during the final assault. They found pockets of colonists hiding in storage rooms and maintenance shafts. Afraid to believe that the nightmare was over, she reached a small room near the communications center and found a young woman slumped over a console. Still wearing headphones, still monitoring frequencies, even though her equipment had run out of power hours ago. "Hey," Price said gently, touching the woman's shoulder. "You can stop now. We're here." Lucy Vance looked up with red eyes and a face streaked with tears. "The signal," she whispered. "It worked." The signal actually worked. Price smiled and helped her to her feet. "It worked. You saved your people." On the surface, the last pockets of Vectari resistance crumbled. Most of the alien soldiers surrendered once they realized their fleet was destroyed and no rescue would come. A few fought to the death, preferring to die rather than face human justice. The Marines accommodated them. Commander Zeth Call was brought before Admiral Patricia Cole on the bridge of the Relentless. He stood in restraints, his forearms bound behind his back, his silver rank markings now meaningless. He looked at the small human woman with her silver hair and cold eyes, and he did not understand. "Why?" he asked. "This colony has no strategic value. These people are farmers and children. Why would you come so far, lose ships and soldiers, for worthless civilians?" Patricia stepped closer, looking up at the alien who towered over her. Her voice was quiet but sharp as a blade. "Because they are ours," she said. "Every farmer, every child, every person who left Earth to build a new home among the stars. They carry our hope with them. They carry our future. And we will cross any distance, fight any enemy, and pay any price to bring them home." Zethkal stared at her, and for the first time something like fear flickered in his alien eyes. He had conquered a dozen worlds. He had crushed species that begged for mercy. But he had never faced an enemy like this. An enemy that would not calculate cost and benefit. An enemy that would burn across the galaxy for a handful of farmers. "Take him to the brig," Patricia ordered. "He'll answer for what he's done." The evacuation continued throughout the day. Shuttles flew constantly between the surface and the fleet. carrying civilians to the safety of the ships. Medical teams worked around the clock, treating wounds and illnesses that had festered during the long siege. Dr. Henry Shaw was finally able to rest. Other doctors had come with the fleet, bringing medicine and equipment he had only dreamed of during those dark weeks. He sat in the relentless medical bay, watching his patients receive proper care, and allowed himself to cry for the first time since the invasion. Daniel Morrison was one of the last to leave the surface. His leg wound had become badly infected, and the Marine medics insisted on immediate surgery. Grace walked beside his stretcher as they carried him to the shuttle, holding his hand the way she had held it on their wedding day. "I'm not going anywhere," Daniel said, reading the fear in her eyes. "You can't get rid of me that easily." Grace laughed through her tears. "You'd better not. I need someone to help me rebuild this place." The surgery was successful. Daniel would walk with a limp for the rest of his life, a permanent reminder of the battle he had fought to protect his people. But he was alive, and Grace was beside him, and that was enough. 3 days after liberation, a memorial service was held on the Relentless. The hangar bay was cleared and filled with colonists and Marines, standing together in rows that stretched from wall to wall. Holographic displays showed the names of the dead, human and otherwise. 117 colonists had died during the siege. 14 Marines had fallen in the liberation. Each name was read aloud, each life honored with a moment of silence. Admiral Patricia Cole spoke to the gathered crowd, her voice carrying through the vast space. She talked about sacrifice and courage, about the bond between Earth and its far-flung children. She talked about the future they would build together, a future where no colony would ever feel alone. "The Victari thought they could break you," she said. "They thought isolation would make you weak. They were wrong. You held on. You fought back. You never gave up hope that help would come. And when we arrived, we found not victims, but warriors. Farmers who became soldiers. Teachers who became medics. Ordinary people who did extraordinary things." She paused and looked around the room, meeting the eyes of colonists and Marines alike. "This is what it means to be human. This is who we are. We protect our own. We never leave anyone behind. And God help anyone who thinks they can take our people from us." The room erupted in cheers that shook the walls. In the days that followed, life slowly returned to something like normal. Colonists who had lost everything began planning for the future. Some would return to Earth, at least for a while. Others were determined to stay and rebuild New Haven. Lucy Vance was awarded Earth's highest civilian honor, the Star of Terra, for her role in sending the distress signal that brought salvation. She stood on a stage in the Relentless Auditorium, accepting the medal with trembling hands and tear-streaked cheeks. "I didn't do anything special," she said in her speech. "I just didn't give up." None of us gave up. Marcus Bell requested transfer to Marine training. The young man who had once built bombs from farming chemicals wanted to learn to fight properly. Commander Ortiz personally approved his application. "Kid's got guts," Jake told his officers. "We could use more like him." Katie Dunn began surveying sites for the new colony buildings. She walked through the burned fields and ruined structures, taking notes and making plans. New Haven would rise again, stronger and better than before. Earth established a permanent military presence in the system. 2 destroyers would remain on station, with regular patrols and resupply runs. No colony would ever be caught undefended again. On the last evening before the fleet departed for Earth, Grace and Daniel sat together on a ridge overlooking the ruins of their home. Daniel's leg was in a brace, and he leaned on a cane, but he insisted on climbing the hill one more time. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Above them, the lights of Earth's ships drifted across the stars like guardian angels. "We'll rebuild," Grace said, looking at the empty fields below. We'll plant new crops. We'll build new homes. Daniel nodded slowly. It won't be the same. No, Grace agreed. It'll be better. Because now we know we're not alone. Now we know that if anything happens, Earth will come. They sat in silence as the stars emerged one by one. The same stars that had watched the invasion. The same stars that had witnessed the liberation. The same stars that would shine on the new colony they would build together. Far away, in the depths of space, word of the Battle of New Haven spread through the Vectari Empire. For the first time, other species heard stories of the humans who had crossed the void to save a handful of farmers. Stories of an enemy who did not calculate costs or consider odds. An enemy who came for their people no matter what, and in command centers across a dozen alien worlds. Strategists looked at their maps and reconsidered their plans. The humans were not just another species to be conquered. They were something new. Something dangerous. Something that would fight to the last breath for their own. On the ridge above New Haven, Grace took Daniel's hand and watched the fleet depart. The ships climbed toward the stars, carrying the wounded, the weary, and the freed. I love you, she said quietly. Daniel squeezed her hand. I love you too. Tomorrow, they would start rebuilding. Tomorrow, the hard work would begin again. But tonight, they could rest. Tonight, they could remember. Tonight, they could be grateful. They were alive. They were free. And they were home. The end.